I'm back. Hell yes. I'm back from Japan and I want to tell you everything about it. Yo, it's Eddie Ortega and this chair makes a lot of noise. Forget this thing. Much better. Okay, I spent a whole month in Japan painting every single day, and it was one of the most blissful and awesome experiences of my life. And I want to share it with you because I think this is something that anybody could try out that is like a fantastic practice that might help you with your art. I wanted to paint every single day, and I gave myself just one simple rule, which was get out there and draw or paint at least once a day. And wow, in 30 days, that turned into over 50 paintings actually that really helped me with my progress. But before I show them to you, I want to tell you a little bit about why I did this, how I did it, and just why I think you should do it too. So, to just be perfectly honest and transparent with you, friend, I applied to this art residency in Japan for 2 years in a row. I won't name any names because it's their loss for not having me. Just kidding. I don't know why I didn't get in, but I applied twice and I didn't make it. I get the sense that I was not the kind of artist that they were looking for. Maybe they were looking for more of a fine arts thing. And you know, after doing some thinking and feeling like, oh, well, if I don't get this residency, I can't go and have this experience, I realized that I don't really need somebody to approve me to go have that experience myself. So I planned my days, I sat down and I thought, okay, if I had 1 month, what would I do with that time? I grabbed any art books that I had that I felt were related to the subject. Most importantly, how to paint landscapes quickly and beautiful. How to paint landscapes quickly and beautifully in watercolor and gouache. This is a random book that I got at my school library where I teach by Nathan Fox, and actually it really helped me because in the spirit of making sure that I had a productive and fruitful and fun experience, I wanted to emulate what it would feel like to have a mentor or a guide. And since I didn't have one, I took his book. And that's what I used to kind of guide me through my week to week and day to day as I endeavored in making outside watercolor paintings. So I did some budgeting, packed my stuff, told my partner, told my job, did all the logistics, and it was hard and it was challenging and it was kind of scary, to be honest, because to take the leap on something that I had always wanted to do without some external approval. I think before it was like, well, if these people approve me, then I have an excuse to do it. And in this case, it was just like, I'm just gonna do it because I believe in it. So I'm gonna tell you the story of my time in Japan through the paintings that I made. All right, this is where the adventure begins. The very first painting, actually, that's a lie. Let's not lie to the people. This was the first painting. I call this a rough start. I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. It always goes like that. Now, at the time I finally made it out into the world, which, you know, actually took me a couple of days when I got there, this was the first thing I painted. I actually wanted to just explore in the nearby area, and the thing that I was most drawn to was the train stations. It was so hard. Like I wrote in here, there was just too much to see. I feel like the first few days was just about learning how to see. Everywhere I looked, you know, I felt like, wow, when you're out there and you're trying to sit down with your paper and your materials and everything gets complicated and overwhelming. And there's also this component of drawing attention to yourself because you're sitting down and drawing, and it just felt overwhelming, although, you know, it made some visual sense. I love the colors. But, you know, it was just the beginning. Now, around my neighborhood, there were also just these like really cool overpasses. And, you know, as tends to be the theme, as tends to happen to me, I feel that this was a little bit overworked. You cannot find what is the focal point in this image. Everything seemed equally important. There's just so much visual variety in Japan. I think that was one of the biggest things that happened for me. And everywhere I look is a different kind of buffet of imagery, whether it was trees, the train stations, and the structures. Here's another attempt at a park. It actually looked pretty chaotic. This week just went like that, going out, trying to see, trying to simplify. And so here is where enter our lovely How to Draw Landscapes Beautifully to the rescue. Every chapter is touching on a simple idea. But what I love about the concept that he shares in this book is this idea that he calls the simple statement, okay? So one day after, like my third day, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I consulted my mentor here, and I found this statement. It is not possible to paint every detail you see. So ask yourself, what made you want to paint that particular location? Identify that quality and strongly emphasize it in your painting, and edit anything that might distract from it. Yep, day 3, and that's exactly what I needed to hear, friend. So with that concept in mind, I started going around and trying to notice things, not just for their visual richness, but trying to connect with, what do I care about in this scene? Why am I here? And why do I feel drawn to this image? And once I started doing that, I had an interesting breakthrough. Here's my first image after I read that. For me, this was a moment where I started to simplify what I was seeing. So I was reflecting on that, I was having a coffee, it's like day 3, I'm alone, and I look up and I see this beautiful building. Well, it wasn't necessarily beautiful, but it had an atmosphere to it. You'll notice that there isn't actually a whole lot of color. If you see this one image that I made before, so many colors, green, blue, yellow, red, oh my God, it's, what is the focal point? This image, however, has a sense of consistency, because what actually was most striking about that visage was how little color there was in it. It all just had kind of a blue atmosphere. And so I was really happy with how this turned out. All right, so this idea of the simple statement pretty much set the tone for my time in Japan. Every time I would sit down to paint, I would feel drawn to something. I'd stop myself and I'd be like, what is the thing that I am connecting to here, if that makes sense? And so emboldened with that sort of initial breakthrough in my immediate neighborhood, I gave myself permission to start exploring deeper into the city, going to the more overwhelming areas that had so many different sights and sounds and, pretty much every aspect of the sensory experience was overwhelming. And I needed to find ways to filter it down to why was I trying to capture it. And check out what happened after that. I went out again, tried the city again, and I kept happening upon overpasses. I don't know what it is. I was just obsessed with the shadows that they cast. And so I decided that that's what I needed to emphasize. It is a much stronger statement. And I just felt that I could sort of relax into that and focus on that experience, and also zone in on the color spectrum. I started to think, well, I see all these visual colors. I need to make some edits and reduce things. And for me, it was the sense that the light was purplish and like orangish in the sunset that really did it for me. So this is kind of what came of it. I'm actually really proud of this painting. I feel like it has a dynamism, it has a tasty color palette, and pretty early on I started to feel a sense of confidence arising. And this sense of confidence really carried through. This was on the same day. This is the crazy thing. I made all of these on the same day. Same thing. I just saw so many people and so many signs and the sky, and man, how the hell do I make sense of this? And so I decided to emphasize the hordes of people and just the buildings in the foreground and let everything else be suggested. And that's what it looked like. And I actually wrote in this one, I said, it can take a long time to see the essence. And it's true, because I sat there for a long time, and although the painting itself is simple, it just took a long time to lock in on what was exactly meaningful to depict. And then that approach carried over to the sort of outdoor experience as well. I just decided to give it a shot in a much more simplified way. And even though this isn't an overpass, it's kind of the same idea. Like there's the shadow of this tree and the contrast between that and the light in the sort of the grass meadow. And in contrast with this attempt, there is a sense of commitment to simplicity. And I think that was one of the biggest things that I got out of this experience. Now, honestly, it was, just the first week, I felt that I could relax because this idea of the simple statement was kind of like there for me, I went to this coffee shop and I was just like, okay, I was enthralled by the vision of like a person that was working behind the counter and these people that were just sitting there waiting for their drink. And so I decided to let everything else fall by the wayside. It was actually really sweet because when I was sitting at the shop, the person who was actually working there came up to me. They kind of took a peek at what I was doing and they were just like, dude, awesome. Well, they literally said Sugoi, which, you know, as you know. But for me, it was really sweet that somebody would go out of their way just to tell me that they appreciated what I was doing. So that kind of filled my heart. And I don't know, it just contributed to my sense of confidence again. And this piece I painted from the inside of a kind of a ramen shop. And same idea. How do I simplify this? And for me, it became about this one person that was in the foreground and kind of the darkness from the inside and the light outside. Actually, now that I think about it, so many of these images are kind of about the contrast between light and dark, like, you know, under the bridge, under the tree, inside to outside. I really love the way this came out, like stylized, you know? All right, so I haven't even told you about what my arrangement was like, and I think this played a really important and special part of my time in Tokyo. I knew I was gonna stay in only one place for the whole month, so finding the right place was essential for me, and the way I found it was with my heart, man. I'm not super good at planning these things. I don't like comparing a bunch of options, so I just looked on Airbnb, and while I was just scrolling, you know, and I found this one place that just looked so beautiful, so cozy, had a lot of greens, and the host profile talked all about how they were an artist and how they saw their house as art. They were an architect. And so for me, that was like immediately it. It was in a quiet neighborhood, and I was just like, that's the person I gotta go hang out with. And this was an older Japanese woman. Her name was Mitsuko, and what I thought was just so lovely about my time with her is that even though she didn't like fully like we didn't fully speak each other's language, via Google Translate and just like hard effort, we just like communicated all day long. And she lived in the top floor, and I had this wonderful area downstairs where I could set up my paints. And every single morning, she'd come down with some little treat, something to eat, breakfast, right? Or a tea or something like that. And she'd just find me just painting away at the, at the desk. And we'd just have the most lovely conversations. She would always ask me, oh, what are you painting today? Or where did you go yesterday? And this sort of became like my only connection for the first 2 weeks. I guess it just made me feel comfortable and at home. And at some point, I even asked her if she was okay with me just pinning up my artwork on the walls, because this is what I do in my own home studio. And she was just all about it. Every day she'd come, she'd ask me, oh, where's this place? Where's that place? Or where did you go? And she'd even bring me flyers for museums that I should go see. So then my days kind of just went like that. I would wake up, go for a little morning walk, get a little coffee, come into the studio and start drawing. And then we'd have a chat or something. Then I'd go out to paint for the whole day or go to one of those museums and just scout and take in. And then I'd come back at night and paint away again. And that's just what I did for like 2 weeks. And it cost very little. I didn't spend almost any money. I bought coffee. I mean, obviously the lodging, but outside of that, I was just focused on making art. It was just quite a lovely experience, and I felt really quite playful and relaxed. Now check these out. Having spent some time painting and trying to zone in on what makes these images what they are, I actually went into the studio for a couple days and I decided to make up the scenes. So these are little lies that I told here and just basically simplified compositions just from my mind as if I were just painting these landscapes. And the results were quite fun and quite striking. Like, if you look at this image right here, you would totally think that's a scene that was just made on site. Or even this one right here, that's like giving straight up like Ghibli vibes. But in reality, it was just me playing and basically replicating that simplified statement in a made up scene. Here's one where I tried a bunch of different colors. And another quote from that book that I had with me was, where there is contrast, there is attention. So, I played with adding contrasting color schemes, and it was just for fun. It wasn't really, I was trying to think of the recipe that makes for a landscape image, if that makes sense. Now, I gotta be honest, this is where things started to take a turn and I started to struggle. I started to feel pretty lonely. Just about the 2-week mark is when I started to realize, wow, I still have half of the trip here and I have no friends and I have not done anything other than just go out every day, paint, come home, go out every day, paint, you know? And so I decided to go on an app called Meetup, which is an app where you can go see what kinds of activities are happening. People can organize activities. And so I ended up signing myself up to go on like some hikes. I went to a ping pong meetup. I just went to all these activities that were just trying to get me out of my comfort zone, getting to meet people. And this slowly brought me back out and gave me like a renewed sense of what I wanted to do with my time. And then I decided to try to use my gouache set. Now, I'll be honest, back to struggling. No matter how much I tried to simplify things, what I really started to struggle with was just the freaking material itself. I'm not familiar with gouache. So here's some of those paintings. Now, this was actually on my 3rd week, and I decided to actually leave my abode in Tokyo and go off on a mini vacation inside of my retreat to a place called Hakone. And in my way to Hakone, I stopped in a place called Oiso. And this was a place that was full of beautiful greenery by the ocean. So it had a kind of beach atmosphere to it. And I kept trying to capture that. This was actually one of the better outcomes from that particular experiment. I finally struck upon this and felt that I had some level of balance with what I wanted here. The sky, the neutral grays. Actually, at this point in time, I started to think about how to actually work with saturation. In my watercolors, I have this tendency to make everything bright and saturated, but in gouache, that ends up looking so bad. So I had to try to figure out ways to kind of dial it back. Neutral tones, like a warm gray or a cool blue sky, and how that comes together in the image, rather than trying to make everything the brightest, if that makes sense. And you know, this was exactly what I needed. I once again got lucky and found an incredible host, and this time my host name was Ikuko, and she was this wonderful woman who had this very unique Airbnb that had a lot of unique, quaint spaces. It even had a piano, which, if you know, I'm definitely not gonna not play that thing. So, and in the case of Ikuko, she took me all over her town to like her family's udon shop. We went to coffee shops, introduced me to her friends even. And so I kind of got to continue the experience that I was having with Mitsuko with Ikuko, but instead I would go out during the day and then we'd have dinner together at night and we'd tell stories. And we even watched the Olympics with her family for a while, because for a couple nights that was going on and that was a lot of fun. So it was really special, and it ended up giving me exactly what I needed, a kind of refreshment and a little bit more of a sense of connection and getting to know the people, you know, which is what I really wanted. By the time I got back to Tokyo, I felt that I needed to represent those experiences in my paintings. Because honestly, during that 1 week in Hakone, I kind of took a break from painting. Again, gouache was overwhelming, so I decided to simplify the material itself by simply painting smaller. So I started to break my paintings down into 4 paintings and work them all at the same time. And frankly, I really love these, especially the ones that appear more abstract, like this one right here. That looks very abstract, but it's very clearly like a tree canopy, right? And this one over here is very clearly like a tree canopy with some kind of gate structure in between. And this one over here is obviously, you know, like a highway, and you can see the color of the blue sky behind it. And if you actually see these in real life, in person, none of them are too saturated. I'm using much more neutral tones to kind of bring out the brightness in the scene. You could also see that I'm leaving a lot of spaces in blank, right? I'm actually using the white of the paper to aid me, which is really wonderful. And this kind of persisted, you know, there's still some fails, like here is that overpass, you know, it's okay, it doesn't translate. But there's some other moments here that are quite tasty. I actually really love this painting. The shapes of the trees and the mountains are more implied than they are described. Like, I'm not being overly descriptive, and yet it's kind of a happy medium between watercolor and a more tighter form. I feel like that one, it's like smaller than my pen, and yet it packs a punch. Okay, we're almost there. Last round. These are a little more visually complex, but I truly love them. My confidence started to go up again, and I started trying to tackle on more complex visual subjects. And this one might be a little muddy. I maybe tried to do too much here, but there's almost like a language that suggests what I was looking at without having to actually say it. Another view from Oiso, the fields, the rice fields with the blue sky, just very classic countryside vibe. And here we have more tree canopies and more vistas from the mountains. Lots of what Japan was about for me, just vistas from mountains and then cities. And little did I know it, but that was actually the last round of paintings I would do on my trip. In fact, by the time the 4th week rolled in, I actually had the opposite problem. I had made all these connections and all these friendships before leaving on my little side quest. And when I came back and had done some work, I realized I just wanted to spend more time with them. I just kind of didn't want my time to end. So I ended up spending the last few days just prioritizing seeing them and pretty much just being with people. And man, it's just hard to explain, summarize in one little video all the experiences that I had, everything I felt. It was just quite a unique and special experience for me. I'm so glad and so grateful that I took the chance, I took the leap to just sort of give myself this art retreat, this residency, if you will. Because I feel like I both grew as an artist, but also, of course, grew as a person, you know? And I found that by being authentic with what I really wanted and by being authentic with what I was looking for in this experience, I ended up forging real connections. Like every time I would go out and just like, people would ask me like, why are you here? Are you here for travel or for work? I would say, well, it's kind of weird. I'm here to paint every day. And it would immediately create interesting conversations with people. So as I reflect on this whole time, I guess all I can say is that the same lessons that I learned in my paintings, right? Focusing on what made an image worth capturing is the same lesson that I learned for myself as a person. Like every day I was really in connection with what made my time here worth it, if that makes sense. It was the people, the connection, seeing a place more honestly and demystifying it, right? Even though I'd been before, this time around I went to remove the layers of tourism and mysticism and all the cool media and art that I love from this place. Made a little more sense to me because I felt like I got to get a little bit more of a unique perspective on how people think, how people feel, and even just the visual buffet that is available to Japanese artists that they draw from when they create so many of the pieces of media that I love. So anyway, it's impossible to capture everything that happened, but I appreciate you for watching. I hope you got something out of it. I feel like it was really cool to be able to share this kind of different take on what travel can be like for us artists, you know? So I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments. See you on the next video. Ciao.